very warm welcome to the Indian Diaspora podcast. And we have a very special guest today, Eric Niehe, who is a Dutch diplomat, a former Olympian, and a world-class rowing champion. So he is an honorary member of the Netherlands-India Chamber of Commerce and Trade. He's a former chairman of the Europe-India Institute of the Niehe Business Universiteit. He's an emeritus board member of the Netherlands-India Foundation of Innovation, a very prestigious post. He's on the Committee of International Relations of the Association for Development of Friendship and Understanding. He was the president of the Royal Dutch Rowing Federation. And also cannot forget that he was the ambassador to Ireland, to Hungary, and to India. To India first from 1982 to 1985, he was the deputy head of mission, and then as an ambassador again in 2003 to 2007. So he has had a multifaceted career spanning many decades, and we are very happy to have him on the show today. A very warm welcome to you, Eric.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your introduction and my compliments for the homework that you have done, to dive into my history and put it all there. Thank you very much. It's very flattering, but you're entirely right. I did take part in the Mexico Olympics, which was in 1968, which is a long time ago. And we were not as good then. I was part of the Holland 8. Holland 8 this time in Paris got silver. We only went to the 8th place, just enough for the Olympic certificate, which was in itself good. But it was nice. Thank you. And indeed, as you said, twice, I've in total now lived 7 years in India. As you said, first as deputy head of mission in the 80s, and then coming back as ambassador in 2003.
That's very nice to hear. And of course, you guys set up the foundations for all these the exposure to for the Dutch teams to go participate worldwide, and then we see where they're going now with so many medals. In spite of it being a small country, so it's
true.
It's fascinating. True. It's very inspiring. So Eric, of course, I would first of all want to start off with your career path. So it's very diverse, from sports to diplomacy to also now you're officially we're supposed to say retired, but then you're probably engaged in more things than before now, heading organizations. You're in board meetings and all of this. So how did this career path happen? How did you get here?
Okay. Starting with the beginning of my career, I studied in Amsterdam, in the University of Amsterdam. I did law, and at that time I rowed also in the student rowing club we had in Amsterdam, Niehe. And actually that club was good enough to expose me to the external world. We were not rowing only in the Netherlands, but we were rowing in other European countries. We were rowing in, at that time, East Germany as well. And it brought me to Mexico. And actually in Mexico, I saw that, so far as we could see as participants in the Olympics, that the reality was quite different from what we thought via the television in the Netherlands. So that actually encouraged my curiosity in how life in other countries were. Okay, so on that basis, I thought, what can you do as work which brings you abroad? And then in the Netherlands at that time, there were 3 possibilities, this time still I think, either a multinational or development cooperation or diplomacy. And in the end, I choose for diplomacy because normally you're sitting then, you're placed in the capital of a country. You're not in the interior of a country, which I thought when I was married, and I thought perhaps it's good to have a stable place and I managed to get into the career path of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which I don't know whether I would succeed again in this time, but at that time I did succeed. And so they took me on, and that was the basis for my more than 40 years career in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a diplomat, either serving abroad or in the Netherlands itself. From 1980 onwards, we were always 1 time abroad and 1 time in The Hague, which I think itself is very good, because then you don't lose your touch with your home country. Absolutely. And you are there to serve your country when you are abroad. you can do that better when you are also a recent history in your own country.
Right. That's very nice to hear. Like you said, you spent during your time abroad, you've spent about 7 years in India, and of course also in different decades. So you've naturally watched India very closely since then. Still very much in touch with India and Indians abroad. So, how would you characterize India?
I always use the 3 or 4 Ds when I characterize India. The one is demography, the second one is democracy, the third one is diversity, and in the 80s the fourth D was not yet there. I'll tell you later. So in the 80s there was the 3, demography, very, very large country, now with the largest population in the world, even more than China. At that time, not yet. Very young population. Still, I think it's about more than 50% is under 25, which can be an advantage because you're a young country. To the contrary, to quite a few other countries in particular, also your neighboring country, which is graying. We are graying in the Netherlands also, but you have India has a very young population. So that is demography. And then you have diversity, which is an enormous. India is an enormous complex society. It is 80 times larger than we are in the Netherlands, so far as area is concerned, as well as population is concerned. So that always, the figures in India are always mind-boggling, I say. So 80 times more, very complex. The one in the north of India is a different person from the one in the south, in Kerala, for instance, or the one in Mumbai is different from the one in Calcutta. Enormous. You have still, indeed you had in any case, but you have still a bit of the caste system, although by law it's forbidden to decide on the basis of caste, but that also adds to the complication of the complexity of India itself. Then you have, as I say, the diversity, and then you had the democracy. You are a living example of the largest democratic process in the world, the largest elections. We just had them again. And the result had been accepted by the government, in spite of the fact that the government won less seats than they had hoped they would win, which I think is an indication how vivid, how lively the Indian democracy is. And in this respect, I cannot stop to mention one example which I found fantastic. There was not this election, but perhaps it's still the same, but the last election, then you also in this election, you always go to all the places in India where people are able to vote. And even some of those places are not reachable by car or by also motorized transport. So what did you see in a photograph? There were 2 elephants. On the first elephant, there was the official of the election process with his electronic voting machine under his arm. And the elephant brought the electronic voting machine to the next station where the voting should take place. The second elephant had the security there, the military who were there in order to secure it. First of all, we in the Netherlands, we still vote with the red pencil. You do it with the electronic voting machine, and even you bring that machine in this way to the far away. I think it's India on its best. Okay, those were the 3 Ds at the 80s. And now the 4th D has added to that. And that is the D of dynamism. In my opinion, when I was in the 80s in India, the dynamism was not very much there, but now, coming back in 2003, very much so. And that is due to your young population and to your education system, which makes it possible that about 10% speaks English, which does not seem to be a large percentage, but still it's 140 million people who do speak English. That helps very much indeed. Okay. And IT savvy. They're very much IT savvy. So this actually creates the 4th D after the 3 that were there in the 80s. And I think India is very much so those 4 Ds at this particular moment.
That's very nice. I think you put it really well with the Ds. Nice to remember as well.
Then you come to my 4 Ps, which were my challenge also when I first arrived in India, and again the second time as well. And those 4 Ps are, first of all, you need patience. because things take time. Sometimes things in India happen very fast, and sometimes it's a very long process. Okay, the patience, that is more the passive attitude which you need in order to survive, in my opinion, and survive in India. The second one is perseverance. You have very much, you need perseverance in order to come in a country, to grow higher up, to finish your education, to go to a job, to do your job well. I think perseverance is very much there. Understandably so in a country which is of the size of India, the complexity of India. The third P is patience, perseverance, politeness. But that is more for the foreigners in India than for the Indians itself. Of course, I think they should be polite as well, but I cannot tell them they should do that. But I can tell that the foreigners should be very much polite when you are in India, because politeness is something which creates the basis for trust when you are dealing with someone else. And I think that is a very important element to survive in a good way in India itself. And then you have the fourth, patience, perseverance, polite, and your personal context. But that's not typically Indian. That, of course, you have in many, many other countries. The Dutch are tempted to be very direct. And when you are direct, you have to be very careful in countries which are of less directness. So your personal context in that particular sphere are very important indeed. And that also adds to creating trust between you and the other partner. And then you have, these are the four pieces, and you have one R, and that is, I think, many countries, but particularly in India, important, which is the R of respect. I think very much India and the Indians deserve respect. Why? They had been very long time colonized. They became independent. Today, actually, we celebrate India's 78th Independence Day. Congratulations. You became a republic. You became a democracy. You survived as a democracy, more than that even. So I think on all those elements, on the basis of all those elements, you very much deserve respect. And that is something which we foreigners in India should always be aware of.
That's nice to hear. I have no comment. It was complete. Thank you so much. What were some, as in highlights, during your stay in India or something like that? It could be you could pick them up randomly or something. It could be a story. It could be anything.
Highlights. I think what comes to mind is now in the 80s, when I was deputy head of mission, one of extraordinary highlight I would think is that I was able to write an article on India at that particular time in the economic magazine in the Netherlands. And my title actually was India, the Awakening Elephant. And people in the Netherlands were not that far yet in order to see that indeed that was going to happen. But I was not the only one, because I don't create any, I don't think that there were no one else who was thinking about this. It was the first time it was written like that in the Netherlands. And I think, luckily enough, India has served me right, because it has happened since then. And actually, at that time, I was for the first time already indicating perhaps that the BRICS could be interesting also. Okay, coming back in 2003, one of the highlights there, one of the first highlights, was that I came back in the country where we had been 25 years ago. And in the first period, I had come to know, because my task in the embassy was most economic, I'd come to know quite a few beginning Indian businessmen, mostly men still, but some women also. And when I came back in 2003, and they learned that I came back because I wanted very much so to come back to India, even more importantly, so my wife wanted to get back into India as well, because she found it fascinating also, which is the most important element. And they received me again with open arms, which helped me very much in getting my restart in India, this time as an ambassador, because I started already with some sort of infrastructure, which in a complex country in India is very difficult indeed. And here I was, so this was actually the first highlight immediately after I came back, that I was received such a way by the ones who I knew. Some of them had become very rich in the meantime as well, of those business people, and still they were willing to receive me in their midst, which was very nice. This is one. Two, an internal highlight. One of the first things I did when I became ambassador in India, enjoying your country, enjoying the embassy, and even more so enjoying my residence, because it's a very nice residence of the ambassador in Delhi. Fantastic house. In the embassy, I had a trainee, and I asked her, make me a all-encompassing PowerPoint presentation on contemporary India. I don't say modern India, because you have modern India, but there's also India still with the cars, etc., etc. Okay. So on contemporary India, which she did, which was a relatively large PowerPoint, which I could use in different ways and in different sizes when I wanted to promote India in the Netherlands, which I did. I took it under my arm and okay, second one. Third one, that I don't know whether I was instrumental in that, but in any case, what was going to happen is that quite a few ministers of the Netherlands came to India in order to visit and to try and see whether we could intensify our ties in various fields, not only economic, but also in scientific and also, for instance, in agriculture, that sort of thing. So, and I hoped that I contributed to that. And then the real high point, too, was one is that we, at a certain moment, was the first time that we were chairman, the Netherlands chairman of the European Communities, and we had the EU meeting, the European Communities meeting in The Hague with your Prime Minister at that particular time, which was one high. Latest high point was the state visit by Queen Beatrix in 2007, at my last year in Delhi as ambassador, 2007, and accompanied by then Crown Prince Willem-Alexander and Princess Maxima. And perhaps we can come back to that because there was a lot of content in that as well. Sorry for the long answer, but these were some of the highlights.
Please feel free. That I like that it's free flowing. And so you mentioned about your second time. You brought that up in your answer now, that when you went back, it was easier to connect all of this. So in your second term, I also see that the Indian government changed, as in there was a significant change in thing. And then in my knowledge, I see that both the prime ministers that during your time were instrumental in a lot of ways for India. They're one of the most. So do you have any comments on that? How was your experience?
Yeah, no, experience is, it all belongs to your diplomatic existence. That's in a country where there is a democracy, there are elections and there's a new prime minister. Yeah. You should not overestimate the influence of the contact that a Dutch ambassador of a small country, relatively small country, has with the prime minister of your enormous country and an enormous role in the world. So that's the second element. The third one I would say is that when we were at the forefront of the European Union at that particular time already, then you have a bit more contact with ministers of the government where you are placed. But as I say, don't overestimate the context that we have with the prime minister. It's more, even with ministers itself, is sometimes difficult. When you have a serious problem, then they do receive you. Otherwise, you do it at official level. So one should be, I think, as Dutch ambassador, one should be modest.
Right.
For me, sometimes it's a bit difficult because I'm rather tall. So when you are in a hall, you can, as I always say when I met someone else, we can have our summit meeting because sometimes someone else is tall also. You can have it. So they did remember me a very long time, not because I was Eric Niehe or the Dutch ambassador, that tall man.
Yeah. It's nice. That's a nice start to your conversations or something. So also, another thing you mentioned in your previous answer was with bilateral ties. You started off as in you took it under your arm to actually bring India here, and then you try to push a few ideas here and all that. Can you tell us a little bit about how you promoted bilateral ties? Or
the thing what you do then, as I said, I took my PPT under my arm and I went to the Netherlands and I went to, for instance, our CAI, I would say, the Vedo and Surveys, the Organization of Dutch Business, and you delivered your address, your PPT there. You went to individual companies when they are large enough, banks or so, in order to see whether you could entice them to attach more importance to India. I went as well to the Dutch advisory, de wetenschappelijke raad voor Scientific Council for Government Policy, which was interesting because I knew someone there. I said, well, why don't you? They were very much involved in China. I said, why don't you add India to that as well? They found it a good idea. So my colleague in Beijing and myself, we went to them and we tried to promote the relations between them and so on. By the way, one small thing which I should perhaps not happen, but I did not mention, but I do that, is that I made a contact. So I phoned my colleague in Beijing, the Dutch ambassador there, said, this is the idea. Oh yeah, that's okay. I am already important and you still have to become important.
Oh.
I said, that's exactly my idea. So that sort of thing you do, you try, and more in particularly so, and that is one of the highlights I could say of my stay as well in India the second time, that our parliamentary party leaders, the leaders of the parliamentary parties in the Dutch chamber, once a year they make a trip abroad. And at a certain year they were thinking about the US, going to the United States. Then I told their chairman, who was a former colleague of mine, who said, in America you come every day, but here you have the largest democracy in the world, why don't you come to China, to India? And so in the end they decided to go to India, and there I had my opportunity again, approved by my minister, luckily enough, that I could use my PPT again for them in order to prepare them for the visit to India.
Right.
Because I think you cannot go unprepared, because India is much too complex. You don't have the good result of a visit like that. So I was there, and there was one of the leaders when I made my presentation, and I had, I think, 5 elements where India could be a world leader, which was at that time in software, in services, software only, but now it's already much larger than that. It was in flowers, it was in agriculture, it was in medicine, and I think okay. And so then he said, you mentioned those 5 elements where India could be world leader. I want to visit an example of all those 5 elements, which we did. So they came to India, they were there. And one small element there, I brought them also to Kolkata, sort of intellectual city in India. And there you have the coffee house not too far from the university where all the students come. So we had tables arranged, one table, every table, one parliamentarian of us and a few students. I could not get them away again from there. They loved it tremendously.
It's very nice. I think you've done some very specific things. Niche ones. Probably not everyone would think of these. It's quite diverse. I would say the kind of things you picked up. Also taking so many people with you, trying to make sure they went to India. I'm sure it wasn't an easy task to move their thing from the.
No. It's part of your duty. I would say part of your duty.
First of all, thank you. But then, also very nice that you thought of these things strongly. So it's very interesting. Moving a little bit away for temporarily to cultural aspects. I also see that you're constantly involved in cultural ties between different countries. First of all, between India and the Netherlands, yes, India and Europe. You're also involved in organizations to promote cultural things. I see that there's also there's a softer hand of you promoting ties in this way as a.
Don't call culture soft, but it can be soft sometimes, but it can be not soft also.
Okay.
Okay, we all know the cultural elements. I found my first task as Dutch ambassador in India was more in the economic field, trying to get both countries more involved and both countries benefiting from more economic ties. That could actually be helped, you're right, by cultural elements as well. There was one very specific cultural element which happened in the time that I was there, which was in 2005. We had in the Netherlands the 6th India International Film Academy Awards, the IFA, 6th IFA. which was an enormous success in Amsterdam. Fantastic. We had Amitabh Bachchan, we had Shah Rukh Khan, they were all there, all the big names in Bollywood were all there. And it gave an extraordinary possibility for me because we wanted to promote it, we were in Mumbai. And then we had, of course, a Dutch bicycle, or an Indian bicycle there. And Amitabh Bachchan was on the bicycle and I was sitting behind him on the bicycle.
Oh, wow.
As a photograph. Fantastic. My whole embassy was very jealous of me. Oh, you were there. I said, okay, this type of thing you do. Bollywood, we all know. We know less about the Tamil, about the southern and the eastern film productions, but Bollywood we know very much. And you have, I did not do because it was already existing, sort of relatively small but specific festival on Indian music and dance in the Netherlands as well. The other way around, we had, with the Queen's visit, we had a Dutch Blazers Ensemble, which is a Dutch wind ensemble, who played during that, and we have one Dutchman who plays the tabla very well indeed. And we had them in India, and we had them normally when we have on the 2nd of October, the Day of Non-Violence, which we celebrate in the Peace Palace. He normally plays on the tabla as well as an interlude. So in that way, culture is very much there. India deserves it because your culture is, again, as diverse as you can imagine. And perhaps it is a bit too large for the Netherlands, but we try to make our inroads.
That's very nice to hear. Since you already brought up a few of these projects that you have, are you particularly proud of some collaborative projects that you've initiated or during your time?
Yeah, my father always said you should never be proud of something which you do yourself. You can be content or you can be happy or that's all. But he always found proud a little bit too dangerous when it concerns you, when it regards yourself.
I stand corrected, anyhow, let's say.
That someone else could say, but you should not do it. Anyhow, content. Yes, what jumps into my mind, particularly in the economic field, when we had, in the framework of the European Union, a meeting with the Indian authorities, and as people know, the European Union is always find it very important to be able to discuss human rights. India has so the idea was to discuss it with India as well, and in the end, the Indians and we come to some sort of conclusion in one way or another that actually could be brought up in this particular meeting. And I have again to comment the Indian delegation because they were as I have come to know, as always is the case, they know their dossier. They know their file, they know exactly what it is about. And in the end, they had a few questions to the Dutch side as well, because what about the Council of Europe? Because you have not always got positive remarks by the Council of Europe, which the Indians were very right in. So anyhow, there you had, it was a balance. Okay, more concretely so, I remember very well, I never mentioned the names of the companies, but I remember very well a company, which was a large Dutch company, which wanted to establish a factory in Gujarat. And it took very, very long time to get the necessary licenses. So what you do then you go as an ambassador to the state, and you see how far or high you can get. It was very much a senior official who received me. And so you try and promote it. You say that it was a good project, that it was environmentally okay, that it would create employment, etc. Okay. I never go as an ambassador with the Dutch company itself. I go on my own. Right. Because it's a Dutch interest, and that you hope then that opens the door for the Dutch company to go on and make use of the fact that you have been there, which happened in this particular case. It does not always, you are not always successful. Yeah. There were some things we did not succeed as well, but in this one we were successful.
Very nice, very, very nice. You mentioned a few nice projects and some things that took off after you during your time when you established some foundations to a lot of these bilateral trade and all of that. One thing that particularly stands out is water management. So there's something called a strategic partnership on water between the Netherlands and India. And with a small background to the audience, maybe it's because of because the Dutch are really good at water management with how, it could just be how they make the dikes and how they make land on water, and also water purification and research, maybe even membranes, companies making membranes and exporting it all around the world. So it's pretty much all aspects of water, I would say, experts. Even for, let's say, experts that are the Dutch, India could be, like you said, very complex and diverse with such a big coastline and then altitudes, topographies, and so many things. So do you have any comments on these things, if related to water management and how these...
Okay, why have we become so good in water management? Because half of our country is below sea level, so you have to protect yourself from the sea.
Sure.
So that's something which less happens in India, but that's why we have all the dikes, and we have the water management in Zealand, for instance. We have the Afsluitdijk in the north. That's, by the way, I always say, sometimes I start my discussion with that, is that the Dutch are now the tallest people in the world, taller than the Norwegian. Simple reason, half of our country is below sea level. If the dikes break down, we have to keep our nose above water. So that is it. Water was actually one of the content elements of the state visit of Queen Beatrix, because of Willem-Alexander, the crown prince. Because he is very much, his wife, the Princess Maxima, is very much in microfinancing. We had that as well. But Crown Prince Willem-Alexander was very much in water management. But as you say, for us, we mostly had to protect ourselves from the water. Now, actually, we are always also now looking, luckily enough, in how to preserve water, because we have dry periods and we have wet periods, and the water during a wet period, you should not let that disappear. So you should keep it for a dry period. So we are there now as well, but we start indeed, as you were saying, from a very sound basis of water management knowledge. And India is a myriad, is a sea to drink, I would say. When in the French it was a myriad, and the sea to drink. It's too much, it is too complicated. So you should make your own contributions in certain regions where our knowledge is particularly relevant. Okay. I do not know whether that should be very much in the north or the south or the west or the east, but that's something. And indeed, as you say, we have worldwide world-class knowledge in this particular field, and we are very happy to share that with India. It's not a question that we bring something, because that's one of the things I learned in India as well. Co-creation, it's a cliche, but cliches are normally true. Co-creation is something which you do together, and this we can do together with Indians.
Right, very, very, very interesting. Are there some other specific ones that something that comes to your mind? Probably also with, I think here it's also the traffic and other things are very well managed. So I always have this one thing in my mind when I ask someone who's looked at India from an external perspective, if they have any ideas how we could probably collaborate to other things, because that's one of the things in the major cities you would have seen. It's the cities are growing faster than can be managed. Urban planning and traffics and all of these things. So it just
no, but, okay, two things. One is if we are just to youngsters from India paying their first visits to the Netherlands and to Europe. They have never been outside of India. And I asked them, what is the first thing which strikes you? He said, there's no chaos in traffic here. You're all so disciplined.
Clearly.
And that is a very understandable, I would say, reaction from someone who is for the first time. We should not be, how should I say, thinking that we could really ease of help perhaps, but not ease very much Indian traffic. Don't forget, a city like Mumbai is the total of the Dutch population. We are 18 million people here, and it's only Mumbai, Delhi as well. Yeah. So what do we think? Of course, we can try and help with traffic lights, with traffic streams. How do you manage them? But the Indians themselves, you have enormous bright minds as well. So you can sit together and perhaps co-create again, but we should not overestimate the possibilities that we have in this particular field.
Right. No, that's a very very clear answer. Thank you. Yeah, it wasn't
Doesn't take away that I like to take a tuk-tuk when I'm in Delhi, because they will go to everywhere.
Absolutely. Like I said, at some point, you want the taste of that again.
Absolutely. I was in Delhi when the first metro line opened, and I asked my driver to bring me to the station, and I took one of the first trips with the metro from the one to the other and back again, and then he picked me up again, just as an experience. Well, I think you should experience that. When India does something like that, you should experience.
Nice, and very nice to hear. I'm again very, very tempted to ask you one other example specifically with agriculture as well. I think the Dutch management of, let's say, greenhouses and production, maximizing production in smaller, pieces of land.
Even without earth, have we built them now in the vertical
agriculture, and also with minimum sunlight and all of this. It's very inspiring, and I think it should be number one or number two in exports of agricultural produce as well now. So it's in a sense it's unbelievable, and in another sense it's true. So what can be done, let's say, for a country like India, which is majorly, at least 50% of the people are directly or indirectly involved in agriculture, or it's like the supply chains and all that. Any thoughts on this?
First of all, I think it's when people ask me what are the areas in which Netherlands and India really could work together, then agriculture comes very much for water as well, but agriculture very much so. For one. Two, there are quite some investments already by Dutch agriculturists in India. For instance, in Kerala, there is one Dutch person who invested a lot, and they make now gherkins in Kerala by small farmers, but they all have made some sort of cooperative, because in the Netherlands we do very much with cooperatives, where the farmers themselves are owning actually the factory which produces it, and they are actually exporting them from outside, from India already to the rest of the world. So there are these sort of examples out there. What you say about greenhouses, I think India is very much helped by the fact that your middle class is growing.
Right.
You were an agricultural importer not too long ago. You are not an agricultural importer anymore in India. You can provide basic food for your own. And since the middle class is growing, they want to have produce better than they were before.
Right. Yeah.
And they, of course, can very much help either in just open air or via indeed via the greenhouses. And that's why do I mention the middle class, because that would mean that the products are a little bit more expensive, but they are there. They come from your own country, done by your own farmers. So that is very much a possibility, and I think that's actually growing. We are the second largest agricultural products exporter in the world after the US. You won't believe. I don't think in the end it is a very good thing. We should be a bit more modest in that respect, but at least the Dutch agriculturists and the Dutch companies in agriculture, they actually have achieved this fate.
Yeah, just the possibility that a country with 17 million people, and even with size, look at it, it's that being the second largest. I mean, even competing with something as large as the US is just it's mind-boggling. It's amazing.
Which actually brings me at one other element in which I think the Netherlands is very strong, which is in logistics.
Right.
And there is still that's another area. We have water, we have agriculture, but I think very much logistics also. There's very much an area in which we definitely can work together with India, because in your country, I understand there's still quite some produce which is actually gone lost between the producer and the consumer.
Right.
Now in the Netherlands, we cannot think about it. It's almost all what is being produced comes to the desk on the table in the house. So logistics, if we do not know everything about logistics, the Netherlands would not survive. 18 million people on the very 1/80th part of India living together, you need perfect logistics. And there are already Dutch companies. We are very much involved in logistics in India as well.
Fascinating. Very, very nice. Nice to hear that almost every point that I bring up, you have an answer as to like the status quo. You know, if something's being invested already, something's starting. It's always nice to know that things are happening.
Very much so, and they should.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's say if people in our audience are into some kind of trade or imports, exports, could be produce, anything. Could also be an Indian trying to invest in the Netherlands, or a Dutch company person trying to invest in. Do you have any? It's open. Do you have any advice? Do you have something to tell? Either way.
No, yeah, the advice I would give: start with the Dutch organizations who have special people who deal with India, which is our RVO, the Dutch Organization for Entrepreneurship. You have VNO, NCW, our CI, I would say, Confederation of Indian Industry. We have the VNO, which is doing that for the Netherlands. Start in the Netherlands. Prepare yourself well. Prepare yourself for complexities, and have a very good, knowledgeable contact in India itself. I was mentioning trust. Build trust.
Yeah.
Build trust. Don't come with your Dutch directness, but be aware of the complexities of India. And if all that you have in hand, you can be very successful in India as well, if you want. And then we have not mentioned IT yet, but perhaps that comes later.
Since you brought it up, maybe any other sectors that you want to talk about?
Of course, IT, we benefit very much of the IT knowledge of India. We have the knowledge migrant scheme, Indians coming, other people as well, but the most are Indians, about 6,000 or more of them now are living in the Netherlands. IT specialists working for your enormous multinational companies in IT, for instance, Infosys or Tata, or you call them TCS. So we benefit very much from that. And there are apparently, I'm not a specialist in that at all, but apparently there are several niche elements in the IT where the Dutch are very good as well. So there again, you could, it's not only one from India to the Netherlands, but in very small, specific areas, it apparently could be also from the Netherlands to India. But they are. And you know, the Indians, they are mostly living in Amstelveen, which is close to Amsterdam, because Tata and so are in Amsterdam in the we call it the Zuidas, the southern part of Amsterdam. And one of the reasons why they're living in Amstelveen is, first of all, not too far away from their work. And secondly, they can play cricket. Because we had the Japanese who came a long time ago, and they were there because of golf, and the Indians are living there now because of cricket.
Perfect. Make it a sports hub.
Absolutely,
international.
Absolutely.
In the same light, maybe, how do we enhance the economic and trade relationships between, let's say, Netherlands, India is one thing, and of course India and Europe. If you could just,
European Union.
Yeah.
First of all, be very specific. Don't come. I never get tired of telling the Netherlands we should not come with a trade delegation. You should come with a business delegation or an economic delegation, because you do much more than only trade. Right. You work together. Niehe, my university, works together with a university in Mumbai in exactly this academic collaboration which you have there with them. So that's one element. It's not only trade, it's also investment. It's also co-creating together certain things. So come with an economic or a business delegation. That's one. Secondly, be as specific as possible. Don't come with a general economic delegation. You see what's going to happen. India is far more developed for that. Too far developed for that. You have to have a specific element. We were talking about agriculture, but that's large. Talk about agriculture in a specific field. We were talking about traffic. Talk about logistics. Don't come with general logistics. Take your subject and go on that particular subject, and then see who you can meet in India, and the other way, of course, as well, from India to the Netherlands, because we have Rotterdam as a big harbor. One of your agriculture traders is established in Rotterdam, actually, and he imports from through Rotterdam to the rest of you. So prepare yourself well, be aware of the complexities, be as specific as possible, and come with a world-class knowledge, world-class products. Don't come with half products or something.
Right. Very, very clear. I think that would be valuable to a lot of our listeners from the diaspora as
Okay.
well. Thank you. Having said that, what could be the role of the diaspora in sort of contributing to these things?
So the question is very difficult for me to say because it's for the diaspora to decide that. I know a bit about the Indian diaspora in the Netherlands. I greatly admire them because that's something which I would like to say. The Indian diaspora is a diaspora which is really integrates into the country, into the society where they are established. And I was happy to note that it's also very much one of the elements of even the Indian government policy, that Indian communities outside of India are actually integrating in the country where they are. That's one. Mm-hmm. Secondly, don't see that as a melting pot, but I rather prefer something else. Why do I say that? Melting pot, and then you lose a bit of your own identity. Mm-hmm. Indians do not lose a bit of their identity, even if they are heading Google or Clue or that sort of thing, where you have 2 or 3 Indians who lead, actually with Indian background, who lead these enormous conglomerates. They keep their own identity, which is insane. So I rather prefer not melting pot, but mosaic. Mm-hmm. A mosaic, you all keep a little bit of your own identity, and still you make a very nice total picture. And that's exactly what the Indian diaspora is doing.
Very interesting perspective. That's very nice. I'm gonna keep it in mind and probably use it somewhere. So.
Good.
Thank you.
You are allowed to do it.
I'm gonna quote you. From what you were saying, I see that enthusiasm or that passion when you talk about just saying anything about the diaspora. Why are you still involved with the diaspora? As in, I see you're also Stanbir Gandhi Institute as well. I'm just very curious.
Now, I have not lived for nothing for 7 years in India. Mm-hmm. I came back not for nothing because my wife and I, we found the India absolutely. My friends were asking me, is it interesting? Then I told them no. They looked at me, how can they say that? They say it's not interesting, it's intensely fascinating. Indian society is very intensely fascinating. To be part of that for a couple of years, although as an ambassador, because you're never really part of the community, but you are still there, you should try and understand them. Absolutely fascinating. One small story, perhaps for your audience. My wife came back after 25 years. Me too. We came back for 25, and she more or less. I always think that she more or less knew all the small shops in Old Delhi, not in New Delhi, in Old Delhi. In Old Delhi. She came there when we were deputy. She went there. She came back after 25 years in her small silver shop. And then Mr. Lal, I think it was, said to her, after 25 years, Madam, you are back.
Oh, wow.
I told my wife, either you bought too much or you paid too much or you did both, but in any case, he did recognize you. Anyhow, so we've both found it fascinating. That's why we came back. Coming back to the Netherlands, the nice thing, so that we did new for nothing because, as I say, we were very much fascinated by it. Coming back to the Netherlands, you got a chance to lecture on the Netherlands Defense Academy, on Klingendaal, on Niehe, on what I said, contemporary India, still using my original one, adapted now, which I unfortunately had to do myself because I had no secretary anymore who could do it for me. Anyhow, but I did it. I learned how to do that. So that I did a couple of years. And then when I got 75, I'm now 80 years old, 75, I said, okay, now I don't have sufficient added value anymore, so that I stopped. Mm-hmm. But luckily enough, the Indian diaspora was very much willing to receive me in their midst, although I'm not an Indian, but they received me very much, and I cherish that very much indeed. The Foundation for Cricket Social of India, the Netherlands India Association, the Stichting Standbeeld Mahatma Gandhi, the 2nd of October, the day of the International Day of Non-Violence. There's few things which I do not do anymore in the board, but I'm still a member. And tonight I go to the celebration for India Independence Day. But so I cherish that, and I very much appreciate the fact that they were willing to receive me.
Fascinating. Very, very nice. I hope the association with the diaspora is going to be long and healthy. I'm very happy to have you. It's a slight addition to this. How do we involve, for example, the Friends of India to to play a role in such things? It's
Yeah,
a bit
okay.
open and abstract,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah,
but,
yeah. No, yeah. That's a difficult one because in the Netherlands, first of all, we look at the Netherlands. Secondly, we look at the European Union. Then we look at now at Britain, unfortunately not a member anymore of the European Union. Export still is going well from the Netherlands to India to Britain is going well, luckily enough. So in the economic field, I think now the awareness is growing also for India itself. You don't have to be really a friend of India in order to be able to see the importance of India. There's one specific element now, and that is that what do we call that? I think the diversification of supply chains. Supply chains. Formerly, I think, yeah, very much so. Every mind in the economic field was geared towards China. Large market, economy, booming, etc., etc. What you see the last couple of years, that there is this idea of diversification of supply chains. Apple got its production of the iPhone, part of it now to India. I understand that Walmart is actually considering to be part of their operations from bringing it from China to India. Of course, India has competitors there. It's Malaysia, the Philippines, Vietnam, Korea. They all are the same league. But there, I think very much. So if you want to activate people in the Netherlands now with regard to India in the economic field, this is one. Secondly, culture. I think there is some definite interest in the Indian culture in the Netherlands, but to get that bigger, I think is very difficult indeed. I see it more in the technology field. Of course, you are very much known for your IT, and there I think we should be able to get more people around. But then again, my former remark holds true. Be as specific as possible and try and see in this particular area there's a certain sure interest that India represents for Dutchmen and women.
Thank you. Okay, yeah. What would you consider as your most significant contribution through these years?
In India, one should always be model. I think I've been able to, in particularly my years as ambassador, to get at least the official part of the Netherlands. So the politicians, the business people, the ministers, the prime minister, they have all come and visit India in my particular time. We had some visitors from the other side as well, luckily enough. For instance, your Minister of Finance, who came specifically for the first Netherlands-India business meet we organized, he came from India and went back again, only to open that, but it was in the center of Amsterdam. So that type of thing, I think, is very, that should remain, and of course you should build on that for the future. Contribution, there's one very specific, I think in the economic field we have quite something, but my successors in India, now the trade and in goods and services, still relatively modest, but have gone up tremendously after my. You can say perhaps you put some foundation there. Okay, let's hope I did, but I'm not quite sure. Anyhow, but one very specific thing which I definitely want to mention is the following. So at the end of my stay, the Queen Beatrix came. Then Queen Beatrix came for a state visit to India. India received her. One of the points actually in the preparation of that is that the Netherlands always want everything well done and prepared one month before. And the Indian authorities said, when your queen comes out of the plane, everything will be all right. So I had to convince the Dutch people that this was the right approach. It proved to be the right approach, because when the Indians say you are welcome, you are definitely welcome, and they organize it perfectly well. During that visit, I mentioned already water, I mentioned already microfinance. One thing I have not mentioned. We had the idea to have the 4 gurus of the 4 Indian revolutions discuss their revolutions. And what do I mean? I mean green, Swaminathan. I mean white, Korean, milk. Yeah. Green was agriculture. I mean gray, Narayan Murthy of Infosys. And I mean space, the one of the guru of that one, the long name, I always forget. Anyhow, he was there. To have them chair the same table, chaired by Ahluwalia, who was then the deputy chairman of the planning commission, who actually convinced by half an A4. I went to him and said, this is the idea. I said, it is so short, I don't have to read it, I come.
Wonderful.
Because it was very big. And they had never shared the same table, the four of them. And they were definitely for absolute essential revolutions for India. So we had the subject was discussion for you and the Queen and the Prince and the Crown, the Crown Prince and the Princess were there. And so they were discussing their four revolutions. Then, of course, the question was, what will be the next one? There I was a little bit disappointed, but the conclusion was an amalgam of the four we have had already. But I think now we can add to that the IT, because now with artificial intelligence and with all your startups, 112,000 startups you have I think 6,000 only in artificial intelligence. Tremendous. Wow. You have, I think, 11 unicorns already. So in this particular field, so I think that we can add to that.
It's nice. Every time I meet you, it's nice to know statistics about India from you. So it's a bit, he's always updated with
now, of course, I did my update yesterday because for today.
But very nice. How do you look at the future of the Netherlands-India relationship? So how should we take it forward? Or
we should definitely take it forward. But first of all, it's the EU who does it, particularly in the economic field, of course. We negotiate perseverance and politeness and patience. We negotiated already for a long time for an EU contract, treaty with the Indians about the future of our economic relations.
Right.
That the Indians negotiate, as I know, are really professional negotiators, EU as well. So it takes a time, but I think there we should definitely put, because India is a growing international player, absolutely. It's with the G20 chairmanship, which has been done very well indeed by India this year. This is an indication of it. India, as part of the BRICS, is very essential as well, and the BRICS will be growing in numbers and in importance. The global south will be important. So there, I think the EU at the one side and then the Netherlands side, in those fields where we see the future for the Netherlands as well, very specific fields, and where we then can cooperate with the Indians, we should do that. So 3 levels, EU of 2 levels. In any case, EU definitely on their field, the Netherlands in the fields where we are actually discerning ourselves with regard to the EU. And thirdly, as a background, definitely the Indian growing role in the world is absolutely fantastic. So we should be aware of that and try and make the best of it together with the Indians.
Thank you. Any personal memories from India? Anything that could be fun or something that stands out, maybe?
Personal memories, yes. One, of course, Amitabh Bachchan on the bicycle in Mumbai together with me. That was absolutely someone which I never forget. There's a very special one as well. When the Queen was on the state visit, we had the cultural part of it because the Queen always offers something to the host government. And this was what I mentioned already, the Netherlands Wind Ensemble, the Blast Ensemble came from the Netherlands to play in Delhi. They did that in my garden, the whole orchestra.
Okay.
The Indians made a two-chair balcony in the garden from bamboo. No one else can do it like the Indians can do. Fantastic. So there were two stages, and they could play there, and the Queen was there. The special thing why I do mention it, the president or the Dutch ambassador is at a roundabout in New Delhi, Lutyens Delhi. So it was possible to organize that during the 2-hour concert of the orchestra in the garden, there was no traffic on the roundabout.
Wow.
I don't think there's any other country where you can organize that, but we were able to organize that in India. So it's another very special personal memory. And the last one, which I will not forget, is that the context which I got also in the field of academia. I went back a couple of years after I left to India, and I had a tea with some of those people. And that is something which I definitely cherished also, because the minds you have, and what I said before, and the knowledge you have, and the way the intellectual capacity you have, is something which we definitely should cherish.
Thank you. I want to get back to the fact that you are a diplomat, and I want to ask you, do you have any advice for aspiring diplomats from anywhere? Just a general thing, because I think it becomes
Yeah.
quite.
Okay. This is rather personal. Anyhow, yes. First of all, diplomacy, which my wife and I have actually concluded midway, by the way, because then there was a possibility to go to step out and go and run a factory of a friend of mine. He wanted me to do that. Then my wife and I discussed and said, what do we do now? We continue doing our diplomacy. It can be a very rewarding profession if you know your own limits. That you should know. Don't think, as my brother always tells me, you are a sort of intermediary between the people. I said, yeah, that is true, but you should be aware of your own limits in that particular respect. One. Two, these days, even more so than before, be aware of the fact that you are placed in countries abroad. So if you are married or if you have a partner, you should both be willing to do that. Because when you both want to, I have been director of personnel sometime in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well, and my story was always like this. If you want to have both a career, don't join the Foreign Service, because that we cannot guarantee. Mm-hmm. If you say, I have a traveling job or hobby, which my wife had, by the way, she does porcelain painting, which you could do everywhere. I have one small story on that later on, I will. So be aware of the fact that it requires an enormous amount of attention of man and woman, or man and partner, when you're doing a job as a diplomat, and particularly also for the children. Mm-hmm. See to it, and we were lucky. So as I was telling you, that since the 80s we have one's abroad and one's in the Netherlands. So our two daughters have very much become two Dutch girls now, ladies, women, mothers. And so they had the bases in the Netherlands. And quite a few of my colleagues, when they have their children, you hear them, they say, you know, abroad I feel Dutch, and in the Netherlands I feel foreign. That you should prevent. So be aware of those elements. For your family, for your work, don't overestimate it. But it is a very rewarding job, rewarding career. Why? Because the quality of the people normally at the other side of the table are very much worth listening to.
Wow, that's a very nice conclusion.
And particularly in India, that's the case, of course. Your people at the other side of the table. It was fantastic, yeah.
Nice. Now I'm a bit curious about the porcelain.
Okay. My wife does. You see all the things you see here; mm-hmm. They have been made by her. Mm-hmm. And this, of course, is coming from India. For you. The point is that when we went to another country, she took with her white porcelain. This is a sort of half of a Bijenkorf, which is a large magazine here, with her. 2 ovens in order to be able to bake the so there was half the enormous porcelain there, and then there was just enough space in our removal goods for my rowing machine, which I had as well in order to stay in form, and then the rest was over. So first of all it's the porcelain, the white one, and then the ovens, and then the rest was for it.
Nice. So it's always the partner that gets to say.
True, very much so.
So before I conclude, I want to ask you if there's anything else you want to tell us, because of course you have a career that spanned many decades in so many fields. So I'm sure I could cover everything in the hours.
No, but so far as India is concerned, you have done very well with all the questions you have asked and the elements we have discussed, including the diaspora. More in general, when I look back at my more than 40 years career, there had been 2 elements. One, definitely India, since it was 7 years in total, twice, 2 postings. The other one was so that was a bilateral field. The other one was in the multilateral field. Mm-hmm. I've spent quite some years also. I think the two pillars, I would say. The one is the India pillar, and the other one is the European integration pillar. I've spent quite a few years in Brussels, which is the multilateral one. Mm-hmm. And if you negotiate with the Indians, you negotiate with one partner. If you negotiate in Brussels, you will negotiate at my time 9, 10, 12 other countries who are there as well. which in itself is a very, very fascinating experience.
Like I said, you've seen things change so much. Now it's it's just like you said, there were few partners then, and now it's
Yeah, true.
So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, for sharing your experiences, especially giving us many stories from these things not in can't be found in books or in articles. So I really like the way you narrated how your wife went to the jeweler after 20 years and then she could remember, and how you made space in your luggage for the wife's the pottery, and very nice to hear. So thank you for everything.
Thanks at my side. Thank you for having me given the opportunity to be part of this podcast exercise, and it was a pleasure for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick.